In 1993, the television landscape was forever changed by a flash of leopard print, a towering beehive hairdo, and a distinctively nasal laugh that echoed through living rooms across the world. The sitcom The Nanny premiered introducing audiences to Fran Fine, the flashy girl from Flushing who turned the stiff upper lip of the Sheffield household upside down. It was a phenomenon that transcended mere ratings. It became a cultural touchstone, a warm, colorful memory for an entire generation who found comfort in the show's unique blend of family warmth and sharp wit. The story of the cosmetic saleswoman turned caretaker was a modern fairy tale wrapping itself around the hearts of millions with its humor and heart. But as the credits rolled and the studio lights dimmed, the actors who brought these beloved characters to life stepped back into a reality far more complex than the scripted world of the Sheffield mansion. 32 years have passed since that pilot episode, and time has carved deep and varied paths into the lives of the cast. Some have risen to positions of immense power, fighting for the rights of others, while others have retreated into the quiet dignity of private life. And sadly, some journeys were cut short by tragedies that stand in stark contrast to the laughter they gifted us. Let us now pull back the velvet curtain and walk through the poignant, triumphant, and sometimes heartbreaking stories of the actors who were the soul of The Nanny. Fran Drescher as Fran Fine. In The Nanny, Fran Fine was the vibrant, unstoppable force of nature, who wore her heart on her sleeve and her sequins with pride. As the heart and soul of the show, Fran Drescher portrayed a character defined by her street-smart wisdom, her unwavering loyalty, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. At the age of 36, Drescher didn't just play the role, she inhabited it, using her real-life queen's upbringing and her unique comedic timing to create an icon. Her performance was a masterclass in physical comedy and genuine warmth, making Fran Fine a character who felt like a best friend to viewers around the globe. However, the reality behind that infectious laughter was a woman piecing herself together from a nightmare. In 1985, years before she donned the miniskirts of Fran Fine, Drescher faced a horror that would have broken many. Two armed intruders broke into her Los Angeles home, and in a terrifying ordeal, she was raped at gunpoint while her husband was forced to watch. For years, she buried this trauma, channeling her pain into her work, using humor as a shield against the darkness. But the body keeps the score, and in 2000, shortly after The Nanny ended, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer. It was a battle for her life, one that required a radical hysterectomy and years of recovery. Yet Fran Drescher's story is not one of victimization, but of supreme conquest. She did not merely survive, she evolved. She turned her cancer battle into a crusade, founding the Cancer Schmonzer movement to advocate for early detection and women's health. Her career took on a new political dimension. In a turn of events that mirrors the resilience of her on-screen persona, Fran rose to become the president of SAG-AFTRA, the most powerful actors union in the United States. In 2023, she led a historic strike, standing toe-to-toe with studio giants to demand fair treatment for her peers, her voice once again echoing loudly, but this time for justice. Today, at the age of 67, Fran Drescher is a titan of industry and philanthropy. She has found a balance between her public advocacy and her private peace, living as a testament to the idea that one's worst days do not define their future. Her journey is a beacon of hope, proving that the woman who made us laugh is also a warrior who taught us how to fight. Anne Morgan Gilbert as Yetta Rosenberg. Debuting in the series at the age of 65, Anne Morgan Gilbert stole every scene she was in as Yetta Rosenberg, Fran's senile, yet surprisingly sharp grandmother, with her disheveled hair, thick glasses, and a cigarette perpetually dangling from her hand. Yetta was a comedic gem. Gilbert's timing was impeccable. She could deliver a punchline with a bewildered stare that left audiences in stitches. Represented the uninhibited joy of old age. A character who said what everyone was thinking but dared not utter. But behind the glittery tracksuits and the on-screen hilarity, Anne Morgan Gilbert's life was a tapestry woven with threads of profound sorrow born in Minneapolis. In 1928, she was a woman of immense talent but also immense private struggle. Her personal life was marked by the dissolution of 2 marriages. Her first marriage to George Eckstein ended in a bitter divorce, but it was the loss of her second husband, Guy Raymond, that struck the deepest blow, leaving her to navigate the later chapters of her life in widowhood, while Yetta was surrounded by a loving, chaotic family. Gilbert often faced the silence of an empty home, grappling with the loneliness that often accompanies the twilight years. As she aged, the challenges mounted. Financial burdens pressed upon her, a cruel reality for many character actors in an industry that favors the young. Even more devastating was her silent battle with cancer. While she continued to work bringing joy to others, her body was waging a war against a relentless disease. She hid her pain behind her professionalism, refusing to let her illness dim the light she brought to the set. She was a woman of the show, must go on generation resilient to the very end. However, even the most spirited fight must eventually conclude. On June 14, 2016, the laughter faded into silence. Anne Morgan Gilbert passed away from cancer in Los Angeles at the age of 87. Her passing left a void in the comedy world, but her legacy remains untouched. A reminder that true talent creates characters that live forever even when the actor has taken their final bow. Renee Taylor as Sylvia Fine. Renee Taylor, at the age of 60, stepped into the role of Sylvia Fine, the voracious, overbearing, and utterly lovable mother of Fran. She was the show's second heartbeat, a character whose obsession with food and her daughter's marital status provided the show's most enduring running gags. Taylor's performance was a tour de force of Jewish mother tropes delivered with such specific eccentricity that she became a legend. Her chemistry with Drescher was palpable, rooted in a career of comedy writing and performance that spanned decades off-screen. Renee Taylor's life was defined by a love story that rivaled any Hollywood romance. For over 50 years, she was half of a creative and romantic partnership with Joseph Bologna. He was her husband, her co-writer, her best friend, and her anchor. Together they wrote plays, starred on Broadway, and built a life that was inextricably linked. But in 2017, the curtain fell on this partnership when Bologna passed away. The loss was cataclysmic for Renee. Suddenly, the woman who played the constant nagging presence was left with a deafening silence. The grief was a physical weight, a shock to a system that had known partnership for half a century. Yet Renee Taylor's response to this tragedy was nothing short of heroic. Instead of retreating, she turned her grief into art. She continued to tour with her one-woman show, My Life on a Diet, sharing her stories, her humor, and her heart with audiences across the country. She spoke openly about the pain of loss, balancing the tears with the laughter she had always mastered. In her private life, she found solace in the simplicity of survival, honoring her late husband by continuing the work they loved. Today, in 2025, Renee Taylor is 92 years old and remains an unstoppable force. She continues to work her mind as sharp as ever, refusing to let age or grief dictate her boundaries. Her journey is a powerful testament to the healing power of creativity and the enduring strength of a woman who has lived a life full of love, laughter, and plenty of food. Lainie Kazan as Aunt Frida. Lainie Kazan burst onto the screen as Aunt Frida, the loud, boisterous, and flamboyant relative who was always at odds with Fran's mother. At 55, Kazan brought a lifetime of musical theater and cabaret experience to the role. Her Aunt Frida was a force of nature, a character who consumed all the oxygen in the room. Kazan's powerful voice and larger-than-life presence made her a standout, embodying the chaotic, loving energy of the extended Jewish family. Behind the sequins and the belting voice, however, lay a vulnerable woman who faced steep declines. Lainie Kazan was a star of stage and screen later, gaining massive acclaim in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. But as age crept in, so did a quiet desperation. In 2017, the world was shocked when Kazan was arrested for shoplifting groceries worth $180 from a supermarket. It was a tragic headline for a woman of her stature. It revealed a heartbreaking reality. She was battling financial instability, depression, and the confusion of aging. She had lost her footing. The incident was a cry for help, exposing the loneliness that can consume even the most vibrant performers when the spotlight fades and the bank accounts dwindle. She spoke later of the panic. She felt a raw admission of the fragility of mental health in one's later years. In 2025, Lainey Kazan is 84. She has largely retreated from the public eye, living a much quieter life. She focuses on her health and occasionally teaches, passing on her knowledge to the next generation. Her journey serves as a poignant reminder that fame is no protection against the struggles of aging, but her resilience in facing her public embarrassment with dignity remains her final, quiet victory. Daniel Davis as Niles. At 48, Daniel Davis donned the impeccable suit and stiff demeanor of Niles, the Sheffield family butler. With a withering glare and a sharp tongue, Niles was the master of the insult, particularly when directed at his nemesis, C.C. Babcock. Davis was so convincing in the role that millions of viewers were stunned to learn he was not British at all. His performance was a high-wire act of camp and sophistication, making Niles one of the most beloved sitcom characters of the 90s. The reality of Daniel Davis, however, began far from the drawing rooms of England. He was born in Gurdon, Arkansas, a small town in the American South. His childhood was not one of privilege, but of escape. With parents who owned a movie theater, young Daniel spent his days in the dark watching the silver screen, dreaming of a world larger than the one he knew. He was a boy who didn't fit the mold of his environment. While other boys played sports, he lived for the arts. This difference made him a target, and he endured bullying and isolation, learning early on that a sharp wit could be a defense mechanism. He fled the South for the stage, transforming himself through his craft. He shed his accent, refined his mannerisms, and built a career as a respected stage actor before finding fame on television. But unlike the hustle of Hollywood that consumed many, Davis maintained a quiet dignity. He never sought the limelight for its own sake. Following the success of The Nanny, he didn't chase blockbuster fame but returned to his first love, the theater. Today, in 2025, Daniel Davis is 79 years old. He leads a life of serene artistic fulfillment, residing in New York and occasionally returning to the stage for roles that spark his interest. He lives quietly, a man who is content with his legacy, proving that the boy from Arkansas, who dreamed in the dark, finally found his own light on his own terms. Ray Charles as Sammy. In a casting coup that delighted fans, music legend Ray Charles appeared in the later seasons as Sammy, the fiancé of Grandma Yetta. At 67, he brought an effortless cool to the sitcom, even in a comedy setting. Behind those iconic dark glasses and that dazzling smile, Ray Charles radiated a charisma that was otherworldly. His role was a playful nod to his status, moment where a titan of music stepped into the world of Fran Fine and fit right in. But the story of Ray Charles Robinson is one of the most harrowing and triumphant in American history. Born in Georgia in 1930 during the height of segregation, his childhood was a series of devastating blows. At the age of 5, he witnessed his younger brother drown in a laundry tub, a trauma that haunted him forever. Shortly after, he began to lose his sight, plunging into total darkness. By age 7, he was a poor blind black child in the Jim Crow South, an equation that should have equaled despair. Instead, Ray found the piano. His rise to stardom is the stuff of legend, but his private life was a constant battle to cope with the physical and emotional pain of his existence. Ray spent nearly 2 decades addicted to heroin. It was a dark shadow that followed his brilliance, leading to arrests and public scrutiny. He fought for his sobriety with the same ferocity he applied to his music. His life was a complex melody of genius, addiction, womanizing, and profound loneliness, all hidden behind the sunglasses that became his shield against the world. However, the music eventually had to end. On June 10, 2004, Ray Charles passed away in Beverly Hills from liver disease at the age of 73, left behind a complicated legacy of 12 children and a fortune. But more importantly, he left a blueprint of the American soul. He showed the world that one can walk through the deepest darkness and still create the brightest light. Spalding Gray as Dr. Jack Miller. In 1997, at the age of 56, Spalding Gray joined the cast in a recurring role as Dr. Jack Miller, the eccentric psychiatrist. Though his time on screen was limited compared to the main cast, his dry, neurotic delivery made him memorable. Dr. Miller was the sounding board for the chaos of the Sheffield house, a man whose professional demeanor often cracked under the sheer insanity of his patients. It was a rare, mainstream role for Gray, who was known primarily as America's preeminent monologist, a man who sat behind a desk and told stories. But the stories Spalding Gray told on stage, of his mother's suicide, of his own neuroses, were not just acts, they were cries for help from a man engaged in a lifelong battle with his own mind. Born in Rhode Island, Gray was haunted by the specter of his mother who took her own life in 1967. This trauma was the ghost that sat beside him in every room. In 2001, while celebrating his birthday in Ireland, Gray was involved in a horrific head-on car collision. The physical injuries were severe, including a fractured skull, but the psychological damage was catastrophic. The accident unleashed a depression so deep and terrifying that it resisted all treatment. For the next few years, Gray lived in a state of paralyzing dread. He underwent every therapy imaginable, yet the darkness would not lift. Friends and family watched in helplessness as the brilliant storyteller slowly lost his narrative. He made several attempts on his life, driven by a pain that was invisible to the naked eye but excruciatingly real to him. The man who had articulated the human condition so eloquently found himself trapped in a silence he could not escape. Then the tragedy that had long stalked him finally claimed its prize. On January 10, 2004, Spalding Gray walked out of his Manhattan apartment and vanished. 2 months later, his body was pulled from the East River. He had jumped from the Staten Island ferry, ending his life at the age of 62. His death was a heartbreaking conclusion to a life of brilliance and pain, leaving behind a legacy of raw, honest art that continues to speak to the fragility of the human mind. Lauren Lane as C.C. Babcock. Lauren Lane played C.C. Babcock, the character audiences loved to hate. As Maxwell's business partner and Fran's rival, she was icy sharp and brilliantly funny. At 32, Lane delivered a performance that was physically comedic and verbally cutting. C.C. was the villain, but Lane imbued her with a pathetic desperation that made her strangely sympathetic. While C.C. was chasing a man who didn't want her, Lauren Lane was chasing a balance that seemed impossible. During the height of the show's popularity, Lane was navigating a crumbling marriage and the challenges of single motherhood. She often felt torn between the grueling hours of a hit TV show and the needs of her young daughter. The Hollywood environment, with its obsession with youth and looks, began to feel like a cage. When The Nanny ended, rather than fighting to stay in the ruthless ecosystem of Los Angeles, she made a bold choice. She chose her life over her fame. Lauren packed her bags and left Hollywood, moving to Texas to raise her daughter in peace. It was a decision that baffled many in the industry, but for Lane, it was salvation. She became a professor at Texas State University, dedicating herself to teaching theater. She traded the red carpet for the classroom, finding purpose in nurturing young talent rather than competing with them. Today, in 2025, Lauren Lane is 64. She is a respected academic and a contented woman. She effectively retired from the screen to live a real life, and in doing so, she found a happiness that C.C. Babcock never could. Her story is one of empowerment, proving that walking away is sometimes the bravest act of all. Rachel Chagall as Val Torriello. Rachel Chagall played Val Fran's dimmer Thanawatt bulb best friend. With her bewildered expressions and unwavering support for Fran, Val was the foil to the show's sharpness. Rachel, at 41, played the role with a sweetness that endeared her to fans. She was the sidekick who was happy just to be along for the ride. But Rachel Chagall's real life was defined by a miracle. Years before The Nanny. In 1982, Rachel was struck down by Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare autoimmune disorder. In a terrifying progression, her body attacked her own nerves. She was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to care for, herself trapped in her own body. The doctors were unsure if she would ever walk again. It was a dark, terrifying abyss of physical helplessness. Yet Rachel fought back. Through grueling physical therapy and sheer will, she relearned how to move, how to walk, and eventually how to act again. Her role as Val was not just a job, it was a victory lap. Every step she took on that set was a defiance of the odds. Following the show, she stepped away from acting for a very different reason. Gratitude. She gave birth to twins at an older age and decided to dedicate her life to raising them, cherishing the family she almost didn't get to have. Now 72 in 2025, Rachel Chagall lives a private retired life. She is wealthy in ways that matter, surrounded by the children she raised and the health she reclaimed. Her life is a quiet triumph, a story of a woman who stared down paralysis and walked away to tell the tale. Charles Shaughnessy as Maxwell Sheffield. In 1993, at 38, Charles Shaughnessy became the object of affection for millions as Maxwell Sheffield, the handsome, wealthy, and often bewildered Broadway producer with his clipped British accent and dashing gray streak. He was the perfect romantic foil for Fran Shaughnessy played Maxwell with a mixture of aristocratic stiffness and hidden warmth, creating a character that was essentially the Prince Charming of the sitcom world. Born into a show business family in London, his father was a screenwriter and his mother an actress, Charles seemed destined for success. However, the reality of life after The Nanny was a sobering wake-up call. For a decade, he was a household name. But when the show ended, the phone stopped ringing. Faced the brutal typecasting that often follows a massive hit. He went from being a TV star to a working actor, struggling to book gigs, a humbling experience that shook his confidence. He took voiceover work and small guest spots, battling the has-been label that Hollywood so cruelly applies. Yet Shaughnessy possessed a resilience rooted in his true aristocratic background. He is in fact the legitimate 5th Baron Shaughnessy. He found his anchor not in fame, but in his family. His marriage to Susan Fallender, which has lasted since 1983, became his sanctuary. He focused on raising his 2 daughters and reinventing himself as a character actor, letting go of the ego that destroys so many leading men. Now approaching 70. In 2025, Charles Shaughnessy is a contented man. He continues to work steadily in television and theater, often poking fun at his posh image. He lives a life of quiet luxury and family bliss, proving that the true happy ending wasn't marrying the nanny on TV, but staying true to himself and his family in the real world.